often the thing you have to do is a little bit humiliating. My manager at the time, he was like, we almost fired you. Like, we definitely talked about it. You could barely find the bathroom. You have to have a sense of does it get me a different set of opportunities with a different set of people that I would normally have?
Our guest today is Manlio LeConte. Manlio is a friend and a former colleague from our time at Amazon. And his career journey is one of the most interesting that I've seen in tech. He started out as a junior designer at Yahoo and then made the leap into engineering at Zynga, where he eventually transitioned into product management. That shift into product opened the door to major leadership roles at Amazon and Meta, and later to becoming chief product officer at Zwift. If you're new to the show, our goal is simple: to bring actionable insights to people working in tech and to those trying to break into it. This isn't your typical interview or podcast. We focus on real-world stories, practical lessons, and the career moves behind some of the biggest leaders in tech. By the end of this conversation, you'll have a better understanding of how someone like Manlio built the career he has today. And be sure to stick around until the end, where we'll break down Manlio's career playbook, a blueprint for becoming a stronger product leader with lessons you can start applying right away. All right, let's dive into my interview with Manlio LeConte. I'd love to get started by asking you about your first job.
My first job ever, I worked at a hobby shop in Malden, Massachusetts. It was great, right? Because I was, a nerdy 12-year-old who loved all the things the shop sold. And so I spent most of my money in the store, which was great for them, certainly.
Yeah, no kidding.
Was sort of the outer fringes of gaming back then. And we had miniatures and all that kind of stuff. It was awesome.
So you started in a hobby shop. I love that you got your first job when you were 12. I think that speaks to the entrepreneurial nature in you and the drive that you have for getting stuff done. What did you do after undergraduate?
I was an economics major, right? I have an undergraduate degree in economics, and I had interned at my junior year in the mayor's office in Philadelphia, and did not care for the experience. And so I had gotten a second internship at a digital ad agency. A lot of what they did that I thought was interesting was sort of creative work. And so I had decided I was going to become a web-based graphic designer. I luckily was able to find this place in Dallas, and they were willing to hire me basically sight unseen, I think they hired me over email.
How did you find them? It seems like such a big gap going from Philadelphia to Dallas, Texas. And, what was the process like to get there?
The process was, with many other things, like a lot of nepotism, right? So my mom at the time was going to a conference, and she met this guy who was the CTO and originally kind of hooked him on, hey, will you help my son who wants to break into this? I exchanged 4 or 5 emails with this guy. He looked at my resume, he gave me some tips. And then I remember him saying something on email number 4. He said, look, I would hire you, but I can only pay you $25,000 a year. And I was like, sold. I'll see you, right? And it was actually really funny because I don't think he told anyone that he was going to hire me, right? Because I showed up for the first day, and he said to me, well, do you want to be an engineer or do you want to be a designer? And I said, well, I'll do design. And he took me and introduced me to the creative director, who was just like, who is this person? Who is this sort of untrained random person? But he was a really good guy and kind of took me on, taught me a bunch of stuff, both around design and then also about how to operate in the kind of real world. And that was it. I was working in tech at 21 or whatever.
And so you get started in graphic design, you eventually make your way into engineering and then product management. What did that journey look like? How did you go from point A to point C in this case?
I was a weird graphic designer, right? Because I never really went back and got that formal visual design training. And so I was kind of mediocre at the discipline, right? What I was good at was I was technical enough that I could do a bunch of stuff that the design folks typically didn't know how to do, right? So at the time it was a lot of HTML. I could do a lot of HTML. I could do some JavaScript. I could do some CSS. Eventually I ended up through a friend of mine in gaming, and a small gaming startup where I was doing sort of flash games, a lot of little flash games for our virtual world startup. And then that kind of ended up not working out. And so I sort of one way or other found my way to Zynga through the same guy, honestly, right? He left, he went to Zynga, he hired me. He originally hired me as a UI designer. That was my official title. But, then said to me basically on day 5, hey, you're going to be coding, right? We need you to do front end development for this game.
Which game?
Cityville. It was called Cityville. It was sort of a virtual version of Sim City to some degree. But
nice.
You had citizens and you had a lot of buildings, and we had some cool kind of mechanics. You could like go do things in other people's cities, which was nice. No earthquakes or anything, right? It was all very kind of up into the right city building. But I didn't really like the engineering job, right? I'd never really wanted to be a full-time engineer, in part because I liked deciding what to do, right? I was still sort of rooted in that design ethos of, hey, I want to build this thing that I've kind of come up with. And at least at Zynga, at least at the Cityville studio, the role that got that privilege was the product managers. And so after a couple of years, I went to my team and I said, hey, look, this isn't really working out for me. Like, I think I'm going to leave, honestly. I was like, I think I'm going to go find another job somewhere else. And they said, well, before you do that, is there anything you'd like to do here? And I said, well, I'd actually like to try to become a product manager. And they, were very charitable about sort of letting me do that. The caveat being that my test to see if I could be the PM it was probably only 4 to 5 weeks, but it felt like a long time. I would come in and I would be the PM from like, call it 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. And then from 6 p.m. to 3 a.m., I would still do my old engineering job because they couldn't afford to sort of lose me doing engineering. And so they said, you're going to PM a feature and then you're going to build a feature. We're just going to see how this goes. And that went for a while. And then I launched the feature and they said, oh, this was okay. Yeah, you kind of did it. So now you can sort of transition over to the product management organization.
So a good example there of just, you see something you want to do, you figure out a path to do it, and you just kind of suck it up and grind to get it done. When did you start to feel like you had it, where you were like, I get this product stuff inside and out? And what was that process like?
I knew I was going to be a good product manager on the first day, because the first day I officially held the title at Zynga, I remember being asked questions that A, I was excited to answer, and B, like actually had a bunch of different skill sets to be able to have an opinion on. But they were questions that as an engineer, no one would have cared what my opinion was, right? Like I was the same person as I had been the day before. It was just all of a sudden I was being asked to solve problems that I had some inclination towards actually solving, but then also problems I was really excited to solve. So that was sort of the moment where I was like, oh, this is gonna be fun, right? Like I'm gonna be okay at this.
Tell me a little bit more about the moments that kind of facilitated you moving into the director role at Meta, and what opportunities you saw and took advantage of to get there.
There's a few of them. A lot of them were not dissimilar to what I was describing before, where someone would offer me a thing or an opportunity that I thought I had no business doing, and that really I was honestly a little scared of, right? Like my first gig at Amazon, I had made the decision that I think I was talking about earlier, where someone had offered me a job that I had no business taking, which was coming to Amazon to do hardware devices, which I had never done before. And I raised my hand and said, sounds great to me, can't wait. And it was too many things changing at once, right? It was a brand new company. It was a much more, I guess I'll call it like formalized and rigorous product management process than we had at Zynga. Not that Zynga wasn't rigorous. Zynga was rigorous, but Zynga was also like, hey, write your doc, edit it in the room, get the numbers, and let's just kind of go, right? Like Zynga didn't stand a lot on process. It stood a lot on like, can we move quicker? And so I got to Amazon, and my first job is producing these large 6-pagers. I had not done any prose writing for 15 years, right? And so I was not great at it. And I think that the organization I had joined did not have the bandwidth or capacity to sort of necessarily help me be great at it, right? Like their opinion, right or wrong, was, hey, we hired you as like an industry professional. We expect you to be executing. So what's wrong with you? Why can't you do it? I knew it was not going great, right? It was not invisible to me that I was struggling. I actually did not know until years later they had thought about firing me, but I sat down with my my manager at the time, maybe a year ago. He and I were having drinks, and he was like, we almost fired you. Like we definitely talked about it. You could barely find the bathroom, right? Like let alone kind of do a good job on a dock. And he said, but then you figured it out. I think what's most interesting is that when I look back at the timeline, like I only worked for him for like 7 months, right? It really wasn't a very long time. And so within 7 months, they had gone from, wow, this guy's sort of a, a dumpster fire to, okay, he's figured it out, he's going to be fine. Like that's a very short cycle, right? You haven't even
Yeah.
gotten to your first performance review. You're barely halfway through the year, and the expectation is, that you are firing on all cylinders by that point. The one at Meta was, it wasn't exactly as crystal clear at this, but the best one was we needed someone to kind of run our planning process, right? We had a fairly large organization. We were or ish 500, 600 people. We needed someone to kind of, for lack of a pardon the sports analogy, but someone to kind of quarterback our twice annual planning process. And there kind of wasn't another person. It needed to be someone who could sort of move, herd the cats, but also had a good eye on sort of what was needed and could live in that kind of gray area between leadership expectations and sort of Meta's traditional bottoms up planning. And it wasn't really product work, but I saw the need, and I often was frustrated by how the process had been happening before. And so I said, yeah, like I'll do this. And so for was probably like a year and a half or 2 years, like I was the person responsible for coordinating and driving the entire planning process for the organization. And what was interesting about it was it put me in rooms and in the midst of decisions that I would not have been ordinarily, even if I wasn't being asked to like contribute anything. And often I was not being asked to contribute anything, right? I was just there because I was sort of held the clipboard. But, eventually you spend enough time in the room and people start to ask you what you think and you give your opinion and maybe they like it and they come to you later and you get, a little bit more visibility across the organization and a little bit more visibility sort of across the company.
So it sounds to me like you recognize opportunity that essentially provides a step function change in what you're doing in your career, and you just got to take it when those opportunities come up.
Yeah, I wish I could say I had a 100% hit rate on it, because certainly I've burned doing stuff that did not yield benefits. But like, it's good to have a nose for the stuff that you think is going to be asymmetrically beneficial for the amount of time, and also like often the thing you have to do is a little bit humiliating. Right. Like the planning example isn't necessarily that, but I've got a bunch of like Zynga working 2 jobs to try to get into the PM area. There was a story when I was applying to a job at Yahoo, which is what got me to California, where I had like flubbed the interview, right? Like they were a no. And the hiring manager came back and said, look, can you do this basically piece of spec work to prove that you can do the job? And I bristled at it and I was like, oh, I shouldn't have to do that. But, my girlfriend at the time was like, what else are you doing? Like you're not doing anything else. Why wouldn't you do it? And so, I worked nights to get it done and it was uncomfortable, but at the end it got me the job. Right. And so that's, I spent a week working 2 hours at night for a job that lasted a year. I find that comes up again and again, right? It's the thing, you raise your hand for the thing, you sort of accept that it's going to be unpleasant to do for a while, but then on the other side of it, it has benefits that you probably wouldn't have gotten otherwise.
Let's talk a little bit more about some other key moments in your career, Manlio, that led you on the path to chief product officer. Like anything that kind of comes to mind that you're like, hey, these were really big moments in my career that set me up for this today.
The Zwift one, I think, is a little bit about just, it's risk taking to some degree, right? Because I was at Meta, it had been 4 years. I was pretty comfortable operating in that environment. And then back to our conversation about people offering you stuff, right? Kurt, who was the CEO of Zwift and is now the CEO of Quizlet, kind of called me and said, hey, I'm going to go do this thing. Do you want to do it with me? And my only moment on that one, and this is a specific thing around, to some degree around Kurt, which I've told him, so if he hears this, he won't be upset, but I think it's generally true, is like, I am not by nature always like the most excited person, right? You are, right? You've got this. You're just like, oh yeah, I can't wait. It's going to be the best thing. I'm a little bit more like hesitant, but what I learned about Kurt from years of working at Amazon is that Kurt hears, yeah, maybe as no, right? And so I remember being on the phone with him and I was outside my son's climbing gym and we're talking and he basically like asked the question, right? He was like, so what do you think? Like, are you up for this? And the real answer in my head at that point was like, maybe, I don't know. but I knew, knowing Kurt, that that was going to be a no. And the answer was not no, right? The answer really was maybe, I'm not sure. And so I knew the answer had to be absolutely. Yep, I'm up for it. Like, let's do it. Put me through the interviews. He's like, well, they're going to be hard. I was like, I don't care. Put me through the interviews. Like, who do I need to meet? Like, who do I need to talk to? And that specific answer, I think, is what opened the door, right? Like, it would have been very easy for me to kind of fall back into, my normal answer, which would have been, yeah, I don't know how to, let me think about it. And I'll call you in a week. And I think the job would have been gone, right? Like, at that point, he would have got 8 more people in the pipeline. And then, like, you get, all of a sudden it's not your job anymore, right? You have to sort of, I still had to interview for it, but you know what I mean?
One of the things you mentioned to me that I think we should talk about is how you prepared for the Zwift interview. And I think that this speaks to how you prepare for any interview. And if I remember correctly, you bought a bike, or you like commandeered a bike somehow. You got the whole setup. Like, you essentially like tested the product at length, wrote a dissertation on it, and used that to kind of fuel the interview process. Can you talk a little bit more about like how you prepare for an interview and why it's important to use the product beforehand?
Yeah, well, so you're right. That's what I did, right? I did not buy a bike. I borrowed a bike, because embarrassingly enough, I did not own a bike, and I still don't own a bike. Actually, I have an indoor bike. Obviously, I have my Zwift setup, but I don't have a physical bike. I bought that. I bought the trainer. I downloaded the app. And then I just sort of went through setup. I was like, okay, I'm going to use this thing. The thing that I did that was important, that I'm not always good at, is as I was going through setup and as I was experiencing the entire thing, I like had my computer with me and I was taking notes, right? Which normally I'm pretty bad at, right? Like, you use the product, you test it out, maybe for an hour, and then at the end you're like, oh, okay, what did I think of it? And often I find that I forget the most important things, like the first reactions, because they happen in the middle of setup, or they happen at some weird screen, and you say, oh, I don't know what that is, and you click OK and it's gone, and you say, oh crap, like, I probably should have remembered that. So I actually took a deliberately slower time going through it and just wrote everything. And then, like, I wrote a document with screenshots and stuff on like every issue I ran into during the setup. And like what I thought could have been a better opportunity for it, or just like from my perspective as a user, why I was confused here.
Well, this has been a lot of fun. Let's move on to the blueprint. What are your 3 most important learnings over your career that you'd like to share with our audience?
3 most important learnings. As much as it's sort of terrible in the sense of it like reinforces biased decision making, almost all my jobs have come through people I know. Like, almost all of them, from my mom finding me the first one to like almost every other one, not Amazon and Meta, but a bunch of the others. It was because I knew the hiring manager, and the hiring manager was like, I want to work with you. So like, build your network, helps to know people. It really is a huge multiplier when you're, as a manager, considering a candidate, or when you're like going into a situation. Like, it just helps to know people. I would say number 2 is like, understand that big growth can come fairly quickly, and is often like a little uncomfortable, right? It's not always like nice and fun and pleasant roses. It can be kind of a grind, like you said, and it can be a hustle. And I think the third one is like, it's important to figure out why you're doing not just the job, but like working in general, right? Like, if you don't have your own internal compass of like what success looks like, then you end up following other people's, right? Like, there's a bunch of milestones out there that just exist, right? That are really easy to follow because they're clear and well-defined, and you look around and everyone else is like, oh yeah, I want those. And that's fine if that's what you want, but it can be worth sitting down and thinking, what am I really looking for out of a career? Because that makes it a lot easier to go get it. And it means if you get it, if you're lucky enough to kind of get the thing you're looking for, you can then sort of evaluate properly and say, oh, okay, like, I got this thing that I wanted. Now I can figure out what's next. I still feel like I have not always done a great job saying, oh, I want this thing, and going to get it. And it's been more like, oh, look, a shiny thing, maybe I'll go this way. Oh, a shiny thing, I'll go that way. And that has, led to kind of the more circuitous career path for me.
So Manlio, one of the things I've noticed with your career is that you opportunistically say yes and pick things up when they come up. Sounds kind of like raise your hand at the right time and run from there. Tell us a little bit more about how much that has impacted you and how you think about that.
It's been a big help. I guess I would caveat to it that the keywords there are at the right time. And that's different from sort of raise your hand every time. I think the phrase that gets used as cookie lickers, right? Who just kind of run around and say like, oh, this is mine, this is mine, this is mine, this is mine. And often, whether they realize it or not, I think we're trying to do it in the like, well, if I take all the things, clearly I won't be able to do them. And then I'll just need more people and I'll sort of like build my empire underneath me. You have to have a sense of like, what is the right thing to add on? And when I think of those, I do think of like, does it get me a different set of opportunities with a different set of people that I would normally have, right? Like, is there a visibility bump to it? Is there a responsibility bump to it? Like, is it temporal, right? Is it like a permanent thing, or do I just do it for a couple months, right? And can kind of get some benefits out of that. It's always more of a balancing act than just like, oh yeah, I want everything that comes my way.
Yeah, I like how you said it. So it's raise your hand at the right time, but do not raise your hand every time.
Yeah, unless you're way underworked, and if you've got lots of free time, sure, raise your hand every time, because you probably don't have enough to do.
Don't know a lot.
I don't know anyone like that. I literally have never. I had no idea.
Thank you so much for watching. And if you enjoyed this episode, you should like and subscribe to make sure the next episode hits your feed. Let us know in the comments if there's a tech leader that you would be interested in seeing as a guest on the show. We would love your input. And finally, since this is the first episode of the new season, I don't have a previous episode to plug. So I'm going to ask you to check out this video about our brand new ultra affordable MBA program. I'm personally so excited about it. And I'd imagine there are some folks watching who are interested in accelerating their careers in product management. This program is exactly for you. I'll see you all in the next one. Thanks.